Restart the. Okay. Well, welcome. Welcome on this wonderful Mandela Day. This concept of tea with Papillon is our little gift to the sector every day. One Thursday a month in the year, and we decided to continue even though it's Mandela Day, and many of our people in nonprofits will be doing their own practical Mandela Day things. But I've also realized that being South Africans, we change things and we make them work for ourselves, and we actually have stretched it to almost become Mandela Month. So we thought we'd proceed anyway. Just because one or two of you might be new to what we're doing here, and basically because I know a lot of people will be seeing the recording, so just let me do the sort of basics, which some of you may have heard before. So what is this concept of tea with Papillon? It is above all else networking and discussing around a specific topic. Why did I come up with the idea? Because so much of the world has moved online now, and yes, on many levels, it's a great thing to do. It's saving a lot of time. Many more people are working from home. COVID has been horrendous. I'm sure every one of you have known somebody, lost people in COVID, as I lost a family member and a very close friend, and I'm sure that's happened to many of you. But interesting and innovative things have also arisen as a result of COVID. And the world is just so much more online, and that there's a lot of benefit to that as well. Those are conferences, which I know many of you attend. The next one is 20th and 21st of May next year, so put in your diaries. The fact that we can do it online, and the fact that I was asked for a commitment with the very first conference online that happened as a result of COVID. During COVID, we were absolutely inundated with emails from people around the country and in the neighboring SADC countries to say, oh, we've seen this, your in-person conferences, and although the attendance fee is pretty reasonable, always as low as we could possibly make it, the travel and the accommodation to either Cape Town or Joburg, because that's what we used to do, have one in Joburg, repeat in Cape Town, just to try and help people on their travel costs. It's all just been too expensive, and they've loved the conference so much that I have committed, no matter, COVID will be a distant memory, and we will keep our conferences online, just to bring it to more people. And very, very importantly, by having our conferences online, we can have speakers from around the world. But one of the downsides of having a conference online is you don't get to kind of network with people. I often come away from a conference and I've met some amazing people in the queue up for tea or something like that. So I just thought that creating an hour and a half around a specific topic where people can get together, can share, can ask, was an idea I wanted to test. And my commitment is to test it for this year. We won't do it in December and January because we're all wrapping up, exhausted from the end of the year, on holiday, often in areas where there's no good Wi-Fi. And people need a bit of a break as well. But certainly for the rest of the year, up to and including November, we will do these kind of get-togethers. And the objective is networking. I cannot stress it enough. This is not a formal training session. There aren't slides, and I'm not presenting formal training. We do training, and there's always a program on our website. In fact, starting shortly, I think it's the 25th, but don't quote me right now. I haven't got any of it in front of me. We're actually starting something that we've had a lot of requests for, and that is a formal course of sort of fundraising 101 for people. That's kind of entry level. So that's coming up soon. It'll be pretty intensive and over 4 days. So the whole objective here is networking. It's great to learn as well. But I wanted people to ask, to share, that sort of thing. So yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. Give me a second. I'm so sorry. Just give me a moment, please. I've got a critical delivery. They told me it'll be later, and I've just seen them walk down the path. So talk to each other, please. So sorry. That's never happened to me before. Gosh, I was told this would happen later. Anyway, back again. So as I was saying, the thing I try to underline above all else is that whilst I'd like people to learn from our being together, it's not formal training. So my plea is that you share examples that you've had, good or bad, positive or negative, that you've learned from, and stay on the specific topic. So today we're talking about volunteerism and everything that entails. And what I thought I'd jump in with is I've asked the lovely Gracia to kindly share some experiences that they've had, and we didn't even, and she will back me up on this, we didn't even say, tell me about good examples or bad. I've left it entirely up to Gracia. So Gracia, your anything you'd like to share on good or bad experiences around volunteerism. And of course, for the rest of you, please, guys, feel free to ask questions. Over to you, Gracia.
Thank you, Jill. Yes, you didn't stipulate. You just said, I say what I think is worth sharing.
Please.
So I thought I would firstly talk about the fact that volunteers, or I decided to categorize volunteers because really they are not a homogeneous group. They are people who come from different areas of life. The first group I will talk about are people who are local, our local partners, like people who feel they have a bit of time in their hands and they would like to come and support the organization. They don't necessarily bring a particular kind of skill, but they bring the heart, the mind. They want to assist whoever it is possible. Within that group, there are some of the volunteers who will come and ask for that kind of to lend a hand.
Yeah.
At the same time, at the back of their minds, there's hope that if something like an opening comes up within the organization, they can be the first ones to be picked up. And maybe so that I don't forget, let me talk about the pros and cons of this kind of volunteerism. It is beautiful because it shows the support that the organization gets from the people who are local, and the appreciation for the services that they would be working with the local people to do, or wherever it is where we are working with a community, our communities. The challenge is when there is a vacancy, because someone has been with the organization for a while, there's sometimes an assumption that they will meet the criteria of whatever position it is. And that can be messy. When they have to go through the due process of applying, going through the interviews. Now, it just doesn't work that well. And we almost had a situation like that, but we were saved by really, we were saved because this particular person, and this one was a professional, but not in the same area where there was a vacancy. So fortunately, she was absorbed somewhere else before our processes were finished, just as we were starting to advertise and all of that. And we could see and we could hear that that particular volunteer was eyeing this position. So I'm not sure how we would have handled that. That was going to be very difficult. And this person was a very nice person. And that's the challenge actually with the NPO sector, that I mean, including myself and us in the sector, some of us, or in my organization, when we were doing an evaluation, at some point we were talking about, we work a lot through the heart, we forget about the mind. I mean, we don't bring those together. We tend to focus on how it feels, and all those things. Now, the second group that I would like to talk to are people who want to for professional experience, who come for professional experience, like students for their in-service training. Again, this group of people is again also a very different group. It depends. 1 year we had a big group actually from one of the local institutions of higher learning. There were about 6, and we had a lot of work that time. They were so versatile, so creative. The energy was high. And I think we worked very well with them, but we had made big mistakes at the beginning. Although we had time to explain what we were doing, how we were doing it, explain our work, expose them to some of the trainings before they participated, because we were with them. I don't know why we had about 6 months with them, actually.
Wow.
And I think there were certain things that we did not take care of. Again, this issue of the heart, once you see, I mean, the openness and you know, young people feeling like they were not only in an in-service training, but they were also giving back, you know.
May I interrupt you, Gracia? Would you kindly share with us the things you feel in retrospect that you did wrong?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Please do. Please do.
Yes. So one of the things, we didn't know much of tech, but we said, okay, we would like to have a Facebook page, whatnot. In fact, they suggested, you need a Facebook page, you need this, you need it, because they came from different areas of expertise. And we were excited. Then they opened Facebook pages, they opened this and that. We had not spoken clearly about who was going to manage this, how many platforms can be opened at a given time. Did we have the capacity? We knew zilch about all these things, but they were very exciting. Wow. And off we went, and we had all the pages that you can think of at that time. And then they managed them while they were there. And I'm sure there were posts like every day. Right at the time, that was the only time when I first even had a Facebook page, and I didn't know what to do with it, how to do anything. And they had to teach us, and all of our colleagues, we all learned, for those who didn't know, because some of my colleagues did know, especially the younger ones. And then there's an issue of photographs. So we didn't explain the issue of ethics very well, because we work with children, but also we work with parents. So we didn't explain well the issue of photographs and how to tell the stories and all of that, even though we had sessions of training with them. But I think there were certain things that were ethical concerns that we didn't pay enough attention to. Very critical, that can bring the organization down to its knees, if not safeguarded. So that was almost a mess. The good thing was that when we found out, and it was found out by one of our partners, somebody who doesn't work with the organization, but who knows the organization, and approached us and said, yeah, I see you are on social media now, but did you see this? Oh my goodness, where is that? And we saw, and then we got back together. Oh, they were so willing, and I mean, so cooperative. And of course, damage control was done, and done well. That was the fortunate part, that it was a lesson. And one thing when that happens is that we also had to be humble about it and apologize that we had not explained it well, because we didn't want them to be so guilty that they felt their contribution to the organization had lost its value because of this mistake. And we didn't want them to feel they had to take a blame for it. We knew they would not have known without us explaining it clearly. And so that almost became a big mess.
Mm.
And but that was saved, especially because they were really nice students. I mean, were very willing. I want to talk about another group that had about a few of them. I don't know how to call this, but they were not very diligent. Though this group was mixed, there were some who were very enthusiastic. About 2 or 3 who didn't want to do anything. Actually, if they could miss a meeting, oh, all the better. And so, hey, that was
Sorry,
difficult.
Gracia, again, I'm going to interrupt if you don't mind while you're on, otherwise the questions come at the end. Was this also a group of students?
That was also a group of students. Oh,
okay,
yes.
so you had one who was so amazing, they set up Facebook and all sorts of other channel pages for you without knowing what
That's right. Yes.
Okay, and then you had a difficult, okay, thank you, sorry.
And then we had another group that was mixed. Strangely, the very first one was beautiful. Everyone there was active, and so active that when they left, yeah, actually, I must mention that when they left, we could not manage those pages well.
Mm.
Now, there was no consistency, as if there was no content. Also, because most of us didn't know well how to do what they were doing. And there's a lesson that we learned from that, and I will talk about lessons learned later. So the second group of students, oh yeah, the others there were some who were very, like I say, enthusiastic and willing to learn and participate. And there were some who were, but the strange thing, when they were approached about, but you're not doing anything, you're not willing to work. And one of them even said one day, yeah, I think I'm just lazy. And we thought maybe it more than just being not wanting to cooperate, there was something deeper.
Mm.
Unfortunately, that group, we didn't have much time with them. So we didn't get to understand what the problem was. But anyway, we ended very well with the whole group. Although we noted that kind of situation, and we didn't have to deal with it too much, I mean, because they were not there for too long. The last group I want to talk about is a group of professionals, people who bring skills. People who will, for example, we've had people who are in the finance area who will come and help us with our books. Now, this group of people comes from different angles. They bring skills because sometimes it's through their organization, and sometimes it's just out of their own volition because they know about the organization. And this, again, they are professionals, so not necessarily employed. I mean, they have expertise, but they're not attached to any organization. They don't have an employment. Mm. So they come and be attached to the organization because they want to do something. They want to practice. They want a space where they can make themselves, they can contribute with the skills that they bring. And those are two different groups. The group that comes as with expertise, not from an organization, they're not employed, the unemployed group that has got expertise. Usually, you also have to know to guide the process because they don't come with experience. And it's just like, even with the students, actually with volunteerism, you also have to put in a lot, is what we learned. Anyway, I'll stress that later. But that's the difference between these two groups of experts. Is one expert really is an expert because they know what they're doing, but even to study the context and all of that. So you really also have to be on top of your game. Even if you don't know finance, somehow you've got to make it work. And it's quite difficult in that way. People who come from the industry are amazing. They will blow your mind. However, if you don't explain things well, the brief is not clear, they can overwhelm you.
Yeah. And
they can go to levels that you just don't know what to do with the whole thing. So but this whole concept is beautiful. What I think I would like to share is lessons learned is one, you can't relax just because they are interns or they are volunteers. Your brief must be clear. Communication must be very clear. You need to know what you would like them to do with you. The challenge with that is when they say social media and you don't even know how far you can go with it, then what helps with those? We've learned to have regular meetings, regular check-ins, to know if you say social media, you've opened a Facebook page, how is this managed? Remember, when it's young people from the college, they are all excited. So they will tell you, no, it's right every day. You can do it every day. And you realize later that actually every day is not practical. It was good because they had all the time to do that. But that was a lesson for us that the brief must be very clear. And the scope of what the volunteer is going to cover, especially because the terms, they are not the same. Sometimes it's long term, sometimes it's medium term, depending on what that means for the organization, and sometimes short term. So the deliverables need to be very clear. What is it that at the end of this time, what is it that we shall achieve, and what is the scope, and something of a timeline also is helpful, is what we've learned. Sometimes the timeline is not by the book, but at least if you have a working document, a working timeline, it makes all the difference so that you are all on track. And then another lesson that we learned is the issue of capacity building. When we have professionals coming to our organization, usually they will leave us as we were before, except that we have a product. And then we thought, no ways, even from the students, had we have organized time for capacity building, for training, so that they could train us in these things, then we would not have been as lost as we were. Again, with other skills, the same applies. The issue of capacity building, we think it should be factored in once we have this, we have an arrangement with a volunteer. So the last, I want to conclude by saying, one of also the important things is recognition and appreciation. Oh, appreciate, recognize, because even though they will come and one day you will write a testimonial for them. Even professionals, it's nice to write a thank you, a beautiful thank you, something that does not, not full of words, but something that they can relate to. It's something they know they did. It's who they are. It is something that's very important. So appreciation. I can't say that more.
Thank you, Greta. That's so kind of you. And you know what I think is amazing? And you can vouch for the fact I sent you sort of one quick line and said, could you just share some of your experience? And I didn't dictate. I said good, bad, or otherwise. And it's not as though we spend time, but so much of what you said ties in with some of the notes I have prepared to sort of chat about here. So yes, you've learned in some cases the hard way.
Yes.
And thank you for the courage to share. So some of the things that I wanted to sort of throw in, and please, Meg, Annie, if you want to jump in, we've actually, there's some benefits of having a very small group, I must say. One of my tips is every organization has an organogram. You know what I mean? Some sort of diagram that shows the staffing structure. And one of my best tips is to have your organogram that includes your dream organogram. In other words, I wouldn't separate out of your visual depiction of your staff those positions that you haven't got the money to pay for. And what I have advised organizations to do, instead of having solid lines, you might have the CEO or whatever, if it is a volunteer position, I would use it like a dotted line, which implies it's either filled or it's vacant, but it's a volunteer position. In some, you can use color coding, you can use whatever you like, but I would start by planning. In other words, my advice is be in control. Put into your staffing organogram even positions you do not have the money for. and in some manner indicate that we can only fill those if we can find someone to do it at no payment. That's, I think, is a start. It puts you in control. I would also strongly recommend that you have on your website, and all organizations must have website. My goodness, I'm in constant contact with donors. And it's quite nice because I'm not asking them for money. I'm asking them for their opinions. And donors tell me absolutely that nonprofits must have websites. They say, you know, this nonsense about, oh, we don't need a website because we've got a Facebook page or something. No, in order to get good money from companies and trusts and foundations, that sort of thing, a website is a non-negotiable. So by having a website, the website that you absolutely have to have, you should have your volunteer opportunities in the same way as you may have jobs available at a time, you know, and obviously you have to keep changing it, but volunteer opportunities are really good to have on your website. And note this slightly different spin. We have to, in the nonprofit sector, adjust our, I'm going to use the word attitude because I can't think of a better word right now, towards volunteers. We shouldn't just welcome with open arms absolutely every single person who says, I want to give of my time. We need to be in control, as I say. We need to know what positions, short or long term, we'd like volunteers to fill. And we also need to have the courage to say no if we feel somebody's offering their time at an inappropriate time when you haven't got the time to manage them, because volunteers require management. And I would also caution against suddenly just having a volunteer for the sake of having a volunteer if you haven't thought through, back to that organogram, the volunteer positions, the opportunities. And by simply making it into opportunities, you're taking away from, you know, please help us, anybody who can come give us free time, versus what we need at the moment is bookkeeping. We don't have the money to pay a bookkeeper, but we have a volunteer opportunity going in bookkeeping. As Gracia was saying, whether somebody is, you know, young and newly qualified in something, or if they are retired and they want to keep their hand in a little bit, or a working mom who stopped work to have children and now the children are going to school and the working mom has a little bit of time to give. It doesn't matter who they are or where they are in their career path. People want experience. They definitely want some kind of reference, something to put in their CV. That is an incredibly important thing. So we mustn't just be in the mode of, as nonprofits, we are disadvantaged. We haven't got money for all our staff, and we are this begging charity case needing free help. No, we need to change that whole dynamic. And that's why I say start by having the volunteer opportunities outlined on your website and have the courage to say no. If somebody comes along, somebody might come along and say, I'm a lorry driver. How can I help? Well, sorry, we don't own a lorry or need a lorry driver, but we do happen to have a job where we've got a big piece of ground that's full of weeds and we'd love to plant a vegetable garden. So if you're up for doing some gardening, we'd love to have you. Otherwise, no, thank you very much. Somebody else might have a role for a lorry driver. You see what I mean? You know, I loved what you were saying, and I actually made a note when you were talking about the website and the young ones. There is a saying in the nonprofit sector: never let the intern do the social media. And that is more based on, you know, there was, okay, things have changed a few years ago, but when social media started, primarily with Facebook, most people, over a certain age, think, oh my goodness, you know, I can't possibly do this, but I know we're supposed to have it. So, oh, there's an intern, you know, they're young, or, you know, a young volunteer, basically, they can do it. But now they might know how to press the buttons, but they have no idea of the depth and ethos and all the rest of it, of the organization, because social media posts need planning. And as you say, they even cause problems by not knowing the rules around privacy and that sort of thing. So if you do feel you'd like a volunteer to handle some of your social media, and by that I literally, it's my expression, it probably sounds a bit rude, the button pressing. In other words, they know the tech side. Make sure that you have some way that someone more knowledgeable plans, because these days, I mean, for goodness sake, social media posts can be scheduled. What you don't want above all else is a keen volunteer who can do wonderful images and all sorts of amazing things, and they can't spell, or their grammar is terrible. That's a shocking thing to have happen. So one of the things I would strongly recommend, it's also important because potential donors, trusts and that sort of thing are non-negotiable about this. Have a volunteer policy, because we need policies on absolutely everything these days. And these policies need to be on our websites. They need to be updated. They need to literally be wet signed and dated by the chair. So you can't just put up a policy on safeguarding or a policy on data protection or whatever it might be. In this case, if we're talking about a volunteer policy, you need to have it. The board must approve it. The chair must literally sign a document that is scanned and uploaded and dated, and that must happen once a year. So to have a policy around all aspects of volunteerism, I think is an extremely good idea, because that can prevent a lot of hassles. The other thing that we need to be aware of, and this is a particularly South African situation. If we backpedal to when antiretroviral drugs were first, so South Africa was the first country in the world to do the mass rollout of antiretrovirals. And it is commendable that the government allocated the kind of money to buy these drugs. And suddenly the drugs were coming that would literally save people's lives. And the Department of Health did not have the ability, the capacity, as in humans, to get these drugs and the necessary food parcels, because they're so toxic, to people around the country. So what they did was come up with a concept of a volunteer payment. I remember at the time it was 2,000 Rand a month. This is, I can't remember what the year was that we started rolling out antiretrovirals, but it's a long time ago. And this volunteer stipend, and I know at the time it was 2,000 Rand. So the department hooked up with organizations involved in some form of health. I know I was at that stage the national fundraiser for St. John Ambulance, and St. John already had a lot of programs going out into communities, helping people, caring for effectively a dying relative, and Red Cross and many of the hospices. So this was cleverly, I think, how the government decided to roll out this. So they would give the drugs, they would give the money to buy the food parcels, but they would also give this stipend, this 2,000 Rand as it was then, to so-called volunteers to help literally go door to door with the drugs and the food parcels. And also, but like the TB concept of I think it's called DOTS, I forget what it is, that the only way that we could fight TB in the country was to have people go and visit people at home and make sure they take their medicines, because TB can be dealt with easily, but the drugs are quite nasty. Also, people need food, and people are a bit lax about taking their drugs. So the concept was world leading. But what that did to, let's call it our sector, while on the one hand, the positive was that many, many lives were saved through the antiretrovirals. And the department had thought deeply enough to ensure that there were even food parcels given. But what it did is it created this new animal, this never before existing person called a volunteer, who also got paid. Whereas if you go to the dictionary and you look up the term volunteer, it will be someone who gives of their time and gets no money. So we just have to kind of be aware of that, because there is that Department of Health issue did create this perception of, oh, you can volunteer for a nonprofit and you will actually get paid. Fascinatingly, this also caused a headache for the Department of Labor or Manpower, or I forget what they call themselves this week, because I know the names changed quite a lot. And if you read anything that they write, they put in brackets so-called volunteers, because ironically in law, as so-called volunteers, as they call them, based on this concept of this mass rollout of antiretrovirals and this mass hiring of people on this stipend, don't know what it's gone up to now, but I know it started at 2,000 Rand a month. They are fascinatingly in law, they're employees. They're low-paid employees in law. So they've also a whole nother headache for the Department of Labor. So these are just interesting things to understand. But so I think we need to be clear, and I don't know what you should be calling this, what the government, literally the Department of Labor, whatever they, I'm sorry, I literally haven't looked up what they're called at the moment, but they literally call it so-called volunteers. They put it in inverted commas. I find it fascinating. So I would almost ring fence that group. If you have a situation where you are doing something and you have some sort of money from, especially from a donor or specifically from a different government department, to pay a stipend, as in a low amount of money, to a so-called volunteer, I would argue that they are not volunteers. They're not volunteers for the purpose of what we are generally talking about here. So I'd like to just, focus more on people who genuinely give of their time for no money. And that is what a volunteer is. And but it is okay. It is okay to reimburse a volunteer for expenses. It could be cost of travel. It could be for use of their phone, literally airtime or data time or something. That's fine. It's even okay. A person is still considered a genuine volunteer, not this strange, different group. As I said, I'm not talking about them. If they are out and about doing work for your organization, and they might need to buy food. Because the argument is, if they were at home, they could go to the kitchen, they could open the fridge, or they can cut some bread and make a sandwich or whatever. So if they've got to be, so travel, so in other words, out of pocket expenses, travel, transport, phone, data, that kind of thing. Even I know somebody who does a lot of volunteering and she does some admin, and it's very okay that she's given some money for toner for her printer, because she does whatever she does entails quite a bit of printing and even the paper. So reimbursement of out-of-pocket expenses, so that the person doesn't lose financially but isn't making anything. That's what we call a volunteer. No trustees, board members, whatever we call them, should ever be paid. But again, it's fine that they are reimbursed for their cost. It could be travel to the occasional in-person meeting or something. So we're talking strictly those kind of volunteers. And Gracia, you were, again, one of the things, as I said, I felt at some stages you and I'd spent an hour discussing this. You are so right to know that the volunteers, that we can give them things. So we need to understand why people volunteer. One could just be a heart feeling, I want to give back. So there's people volunteer because they need to improve their CVs. We have a crisis in our country of unemployment, yet we have a tragedy in that crisis where we have newly qualified people in various fields, even university graduates, who cannot find jobs. And the primary reason that those graduates can't find jobs is they have no experience. So if they bring a skill, even if it happens to be that they've got a degree, but with no experience, they are going to struggle to find jobs. And I know there's some sort of government program, I don't know much about it, that the government will pay generally nonprofits to use the services of graduates who can't find jobs. It's very interesting. I was delighted to see that. And so they'll earn a bit of money. Government will give the money to the nonprofit who will give. Think back to that group who are giving out the antiretrovirals. So they'll earn more of a stipend, but critically, they will have something on their CVs. Gracia, you also made mention of another amazing benefit to volunteers. All right, maybe you struggle with it a little bit, but it's understood. It's not promised, but it is kind of understood that if somebody volunteers with your organization and they get to know the organization and they build up a passion and a care and a concern for the organization, should a paid job arise that they are the right person for, that they need to formally apply. There's no shortcuts. They need to formally apply along with everybody else. But if they bring the right skills, and that's critical, it often happens because they've proven themselves as reliable, honest, hardworking people as volunteers. They often have quite a head start over, let's call them complete strangers. So you never promise to hire a volunteer should a paid job arise, but it's a very clear thing that if they bring the right skills, of course they've got a bit of a head start should a job arise, and I think that is very important. Also, I would strongly recommend, and remember, I'm coming from this place that you should have a clear list of the volunteer opportunities. I strongly believe they should be included in your organogram. You shouldn't suddenly be find and create some sort of role for somebody just because they're offering it free. I would stay away from that. But I would also suggest that you have some sort of agreement with a volunteer. You can't have a contract. A contract is not binding, but an agreement, which again isn't legally binding or anything, but you can, it's a document on which, and it could be a simple thing, it could be a letter, a welcome letter. Dear Mary, thank you for offering 2 days a week from 10 to 3 or whatever, to fill the role of X. Because remember, you've already got that role clear. Your duties will be A, B, C, D. You will be complying with our rules, whatever the same rules at the start. I mean, let's say you have a rule that says nobody can play loud music on their phone or whatever. There'll be basic rules that this person would need to follow. We will not be paid, but we will be reimbursing your travel cost or whatever. And please sign this letter in acceptance. Something like this, something as basic as a 1 or 2 pager that you sign and they sign. That at least keeps the sort of parameters in place. It's a very, very good idea to have that. They might say they're going to, when I say about the legally binding, they might say they're going to come and volunteer for 9 months. And after 2 months they leave. There's nothing you can do about it, I'm afraid. We also mustn't think that volunteers don't cost us. You might have to have some member of your staff managing them. And you could argue that costs because you know what your staff members earn per month. Therefore, you can work out what they earn per day, and therefore you can work out what they earn per hour. And the time they have to spend training, advising, supervising, whatever, volunteers, that is cost. They can't be doing the other work. So there is an element of cost to volunteers. So we need to know almost the negative sides, the hassle side of it. So I think just a bit of structure is what I'm basically getting at. But there are some amazing things that I've seen over the years. I'm quite happy they won't mind if I mention them. I did work for about 4 years for Rhodes University, but not based in the UK. I happen to be talking to you from the UK right now, but very much Cape Town based. But I'd go to the university quite often, and I would go to the UK as I have done for 20 years on and off doing things. But most of what I did in the UK was for Rhodes. And they had one of their students who was an intern in their fundraising department. Being a university, they changed the name. It's advancement department this week and it's development department the next week, whatever. But I still call them the fundraising department. There was this amazing young man. I don't even remember what he was studying, but he was still a student and he was doing some interning, some volunteering, and in the fundraising department. And he was fascinating. He would ask me lots of questions. I was really impressed with him. And do you know that he took it all so seriously that today he is the head of one of a different university's fundraising? And I'm talking like about 12 years later. And he didn't have any formal training. It wasn't his field, but he just seemed to find his area of interest in Rhodes fundraising department. And I just thought that was absolutely wonderful. The other thing that I think is worth thinking about, and that is the international students. It is a thing certainly, especially in northern countries, it's a thing to do gap years. You finish your school, but you don't go immediately to university. You take a year out. And South Africa is a country that is very popular with European in particular and UK. UK and European students on their gap year love to go to South Africa, and often for an entire year. I know they've changed the visas. At first it was only 6 months, then it's 3 months, but quite frankly, they go on a quick trip to see animals in Botswana or something, and they come back and they sort that out. There are actually some companies in South Africa that facilitate these gap years. In other words, they will do the thing that the parents care about most, because all they read about South Africa is crime. But they will also hook up with organizations and say, okay, we've got somebody who is, Meg, I'm thinking of you. We've got somebody who's finished school. She plans to go and study to be a nurse or a doctor or whatever. It's something in the health field. Might you be interested in a volunteer in health because you're from a hospice, something like that. So I don't have those at my fingertips, but I promise you, if you Google, you'll see them in a hurry. So that's an opportunity. Now, why I'm thinking of them, for there are a lot of benefits of having the foreign students in their gap year. And I'm not saying you're going to get them all for a year, because there is this whole visa issue and so on. But firstly, they develop such a heart connection with the organization that many of them go on to be donors for the rest of their lives, to recruit and find donors. That connection they make is so powerful that I think it should be carefully nurtured. I was on a flight, because I'm back and forth between the UK and South Africa all the time. And I was on a flight the other day going to South Africa, and I happened to be sitting next to a woman, a British woman, who was going to South Africa especially at her own expense for the 25th year reunion of the gap year volunteers that she was with 25 years ago. And they were literally having a reunion now. And I got, of course, I had like 11 hours on the plane with her, and I got talking to her. And but it's an organization in KZN, in the field of health in rural KZN. And she says that the foreign volunteers these groups, I mean, she was only there for part of 1 year. They are the largest source of funding into this organization. This woman said to me that she every year organizes a small event of about 80 people for fundraising for this organization. So her connection has just never ended. So there's some noise happening outside. The garbage men are collecting the garbage here at my daughter's house, where I'm talking to you from. So, there are incredible benefits, but I can't stress enough that you need to be in control. And my last point, because this is not all about me doing all the talking by any means, my last important point is, and again, Gracia, you touched on something. Those of you who subscribe to, and it's completely free, the Trialogue publication, where they do this amazing research on CSI in South Africa, and because they do it so well, nobody else sort of bothers to muscle in on it. And back in the day when their research findings were only hard copy, you used to have to pay for their book. In fact, you can still order a hard copy, but if you ask for the soft copy, the digital copy, it's entirely free. I believe it comes out in November. Now, the most recent one, which was looking at the 22-23 financial year, 10.8 billion rand went through the books of the major companies in South Africa as CSI money, which is impressive. However, when you just read a little bit further, under half, only 47% of this 10.8 billion rand was actually donated in cash, which is tragic. And why we have this terrible discrepancy that over half, in other words, over 5 billion rand that companies are putting through their books as CSI money. And there's no sort of corruption here or anything, but they've got very expensive, very clever accountants who understand the law that says, it's sort of the BE legislation governs a lot of this, that 1%, a minimum of 1% of net profit after tax must be donated. But unfortunately, I'm saying unfortunately, and it's ironic that this is Mandela Day. Unfortunately, they're allowed to also allocate the cost of other things into this. So what we in the sector want is, I wish they would simply just give us the money, end of story. But you know, if it's Mandela Day and they all do that thing which we're all sick and tired of, where they'll hire a bus, hire expensive caterers, they will buy paint, they will buy brand new overalls and paint brushes and everything, and they will all go to paint a creche. Now, I don't think there's a creche in South Africa that's walls can take one more coat of paint. If you know all those related costs, they call that CSI. It's shocking. It's appalling. I wish somebody would smack them about it. But there are other things that companies can also do, which is allowed to be allocated under their CSI spend. And this is, you know, these are some of the things that they do. I'm afraid it's a reality. When, as I say, all we would like is the money. If they do, you know, services, like, for instance, you may need an accountant. And as a fundraiser, I'm sure you all know that the first part of fundraising is to actually watch your fund spending, to find anything you can as a donation in kind, not just be given a budget by your finance people and say, okay, that's how much you must raise. You must interrogate it, and you must say, what exactly is that for? If you see a line item that is stationary, don't just accept it. Say, okay, what exactly do we buy? Who supplies it? And the fundraiser's job, before the finding actual cash, should be to find donations in kind. So let's say for some reason you could be an ECD center or whatever, if you happen to, for instance, have to print things and you go through a lot of paper, you're going to get a paper company or a stationery company more readily give you literally boxes of paper than you're ever going to get cash out of them. So in that same vein, if you see that, you know, what you generally pay, for instance, on accounting or bookkeeping, whatever it is, legal fees or whatever, a starting place is to ask for those services from a company as it were, donation in kind, because you're going to get that more readily than you're ever going to get cash, and you're going to save that expenditure. So it's less to raise. And this is all the sort of stuff that the companies are wise to, and they can claim that it's cost them, because they know, same as I was saying to you earlier, they know what the accountants or the bookkeepers or whatever it is earns per month. And if you know what they earn per month, you can work out exactly what they earn per hour. Then they know how much they work on your whatever it is. Legal, so often, it's a tragedy. Nonprofits get themselves into some sort of legal trouble most of the time around labor law. And you can hardly pay the going rate of a lawyer. And many law firms will do some sort of volunteer time. But again, as I said, it's a volunteer for us, but they unfortunately are clocking that up to part of their CSI spend. So I think my real point is that anything around volunteerism needs planning, needs structure, needs proper thinking. Otherwise, we are going to have problems. And Grassa, I do commend you in sharing some of the problematical issues that you have. But as I said, this is not a training course. It's categorically not a training course. So I've done a lot of talking. Do Annie or Meg, do you want to either bring any of your experiences, ask Grassa some questions, you know, share, ask? What over to you. Jump in, Annie.
We actually have never had volunteers and don't use volunteers. Everything that happens it's the stipend. It's a stipend thing that's
sorry, may I interrupt you quickly? Explain about your organization when you say we. Just explain
sorry. I work for the Catholic Institute of Education, and one of the programs that is that we have at the moment is a Reading for Enjoyment program, and it's a great program, but it needs people from local areas to go and work in the schools. But what you were saying earlier about phones being paid for, transport being paid for, and a basic basic amounts of money being paid for, that's what happens. So yes, I don't have anything to add about the volunteerism, I'm afraid, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for the discussion, because you've brought up some important issues that that I can use and speak to my colleagues about. So I just wanted to say thank you. This
absolute
has been
pleasure.
great.
Annie, just to sort of, because that's what this networking is about, just helping each other think through things. Do you feel your organization could use more help? Do you think, or are your positions filled even though you only pay a stipend? Or do you think the organization could do better, could render its services better if there was more volunteer help? And if so, might you go back and discuss it with your colleagues to structure something?
I think so. And I think your idea of trying to get hold of young people who are doing a gap year, I think that's a brilliant idea. We do have somebody who isn't a volunteer. She comes from Germany, and she's paid for by Missouri, or her organization there. And she's been brilliant and just so adaptable, and so I can see how that really can benefit. So that is something I'm going to talk
And
about.
I also think you are in a perfect situation, whereas you're a Catholic organization and the Catholic faith is big around the world. So maybe using that,
yes,
I was connection is the wrong word, but using the broader Catholic family might work very well for you, because you will be very, I mean, it effectively would literally could send a message to every Catholic congregation in the world saying, would you like? So
that's very true.
So that means you guys would have to be very structured and have the courage to say no, because you probably get more volunteers than you could cope with.
Yes.
I just wanted to add one thing, and that is there's a huge new trend called micro volunteering. So don't neglect that, or just understand, have a big Google about it if you want to. But it's a massive thing. Micro volunteering means that different to what we've traditionally known as a volunteer, somebody who will come like 2 mornings a week, or for that matter, full time, or every Friday or something like that, or even undertake, I will do the X or the Y for you. A micro volunteer, or the concept of micro volunteering, is that people give short amounts of time, generally ongoing, and there's no restriction as to what they do or don't do. I'm thinking of, I'll give you an example of now that I know it has a name, of micro volunteering that I used to do. And again, of course, I've done a lot of volunteer things for organizations around my field, which is fundraising. But I helped to raise the money. I ran the campaign to raise the money for the very first street children's home in the southern suburbs of Cape Town. So that was it. I was a volunteer. I made it happen because I just cared that there were children on the streets years ago. And then when it was up and running, nothing to do with me, but one of the people, because a lot of volunteers involved, a lot of people who helped me with the fundraising, largely around events and things, stayed involved in different ways with the street children's home. And one of them did a wonderful thing, and she did, I mean, it's commonplace, but it took time and hassle and writing and filling in forms and what have you. She got a slot once a week. I'll never forget, it was Wednesday at 3:00. And that at that time, Woolworths, the local Woolworths, would put all their sort of nearly, there's sell by, but then there's still, you can still eat by, there's sell by, that thing, you must sell something by a certain date, but then there's kind of use by, there's a window. It can be a day, it could be 3-4 days for that matter. And the supermarkets give those away. You're doing them a favor, but you have to be there. So then she put out this thing, and she had to fill these slots. So I volunteered for the Wednesday at 3:00. I'll never forget this, because it worked perfectly for me. Was we were offered different slots at different supermarkets, but I took Wednesday at 3:00 because I could fetch my children. So I did it on the children fetching for school, and it just fitted in so perfectly. And then I would get to the center. Now these this was maybe a drop-in. So children, the street kids could live there, but it was a hell of a transition, as you know. Many of them are on drugs and things, so they didn't all just opt to immediately move in. So but they would all arrive at night. They'd arrive at food time and so on. So often I'd get there and there'd be 1 or 2 people at the shelter, but I'd have my children in the car, and I luckily had a station wagon. So my kids would help. We'd go to Woolworths, we'd have to queue up. Their stop would, you have to drive. It was like a speedy thing. At least my kids would help to unload these things. So for me, that probably took, from driving from the school, going to Woolies, dropping, it was probably 45 minutes. So for me, that was micro volunteering. And I undertook to do it, and if I was sick or something, I would find someone else to fill my slot. So that technically is an example of micro volunteering. Now, I chair an organization called the SA UK Trust Network. It's in the UK, and it is literally a network of South African organizations fundraising in the UK. And we have what I would again call a micro volunteer. We have a woman who does the bookkeeping. In the UK, if your income is under a certain amount, you don't need to have an actual audit, but you do have to have proper bookkeeping done and sort of, let's call it financial statements in a very, it's a bit of a report come financial statements in a very damped down way have to be done and even sent to the authorities once a year. And this lady does this. It probably takes her 8 hours a year, if I think of everything she does. But now that's micro volunteering, and it doesn't cost the organization a cent, and we have a reliable person. So I just wanted to throw that out, that we don't have to think only of, oh, we need a volunteer for this task is 2 full days a week or something like that. Don't forget the micro concept. Meg, we haven't had you share, ask anything you want to. Love to know what you do at the hospice. Anything you'd like to contribute?
No,
I don't know how good.
actually, we were.
Can't hear you very well.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Little, if you can go a little. I'm putting my sound up in case that helps.
Sorry, I don't use my microphone very often.
No, you're pretty low, but speak up if you can.
To participate. So I'm here with our our volunteer coordinator, because we
Lovely.
actually went to. There's Mel.
Hi.
Just to hear a little bit more from other organizations and how they use their volunteers. So Jill, with regards to the micro volunteerism, is that something similar to what we do with the students in the area? They come in on and off for an hour or 2 and help with events and that sort of thing. So is that could be a new,
Very much so.
Yeah, new way of marketing, getting people in for an hour or 2.
Yes.
With the work that we do, being Midlands Hospice, a lot of our volunteering goes towards our fundraising. And then helping, we've got 3 pre-love shops. So the vols go into that to help with our income generation.
Absolutely. Thanks, Meg. You're raising a really important thing. It doesn't matter what tasks the volunteer carry out. So it's not that these ones are volunteers and those ones aren't. To define it, a volunteer is someone who gives their time free to a nonprofit or reimbursement of out-of-pocket expenses. What they do doesn't matter. They could literally come in and weed the garden for 2 hours. They could come in and do your bookkeeping. They could do stuff from home. It's what they do really doesn't matter. But I think the key thing is that why I harp so much on you being organized. You should be proactive, and you should be clear on the volunteer roles, opportunities that you have, rather than somebody contacting saying, hi, I'd like to volunteer. It needs to be, that it needs to be exactly like you would fill a paid position. But the slightly different thing, well, I suppose you get the odd paid position where somebody only does 2 hours a month or something. But rather than have the courage to say no if you're a bit overwhelmed at the time, or you don't just automatically accept everybody who says they want to volunteer, because you may be going through an incredibly busy time, or the person who's offering volunteer time doesn't fit into that pre-planned organogram that you don't have an actual role. So that's the biggest caution that I want to give. But yes, Meg, you're absolutely right. Whether people work in your shops or what they actually do doesn't matter. They're giving of their time, could be skilled or unskilled, and they're not being paid. That's all it is, that volunteerism is. So yes, and I'm delighted to hear you have a volunteer coordinator. That's brilliant. That's fantastic. That's so important. It helps immensely. Many organizations who rely on a lot of volunteers do have such a role of someone to actually coordinate the volunteers. Sometimes it's a volunteer coordinating the volunteers, and sometimes it's a paid person. But you can see how important the role is, because otherwise it can be difficult. You know, I've worked in many organizations. All right, I always come in and I'm advising on the fundraising side. But you'll chat to the staff, and somebody will do an eyes roll. Oh my goodness, we've got a new volunteer and they're driving me crazy. Volunteers need management. They can disrupt a lot of stuff because they're not properly oriented or orientated. They've got to have induction. They've got to be shown, like a new staff member. There's all sorts of things that you would do with a new staff member. Hey, you need to do these with volunteers as well.
We do. Sorry,
Meg,
Jill,
I'm struggling to hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I think I need a microphone. We do an induction. I do think, though, from today, listening to some of the stories, that we need to have a little bit more structure as to what needs to be done, not as in a case of, I think we've gotten a little bit slack and we kind of just shove them in the shop and expect them to find all the staff to tell them what to do. Whereas I think we need to give them, as you say, structure and delegate, and where they can help and where they can't help.
Absolutely. You know, I think the most important takeaway, my advice to you all, the most important takeaway from this is that a volunteer is an employee in every sense of the word, other than being paid. So you shouldn't treat your volunteers differently to your employees. If your employees are, and I'm using a very broad term, misbehaving, whatever that might mean, you would deal with it. You don't say, oh, well, okay, we can't, you know, that's a volunteer. They're not sacrosanct. If they break some of your rules, they're consistently late or something. Think of that. If you have a volunteer doing shifts in a shop and they are consistently late, that has a knock-on effect for other people who may be needing to leave. No, if volunteers don't toe the line, they need to be disciplined in the same way as staff. And if they, you know, otherwise, I'm afraid, get rid of them. That's why I like this sort of signed agreement, because it's only psychological, it's not legal, but this is what we expect of you, and please put your signature to say that you will undertake to do these things. So we need to toughen up with them, is what I'm saying. So thanks for that. Annie, Grassa, anybody want to add anything?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, just a little bit.
We do have forms and agreement, etc., in place for our volunteers, but often, if they're late, they come and they say, oh, the one particular lady is often late, and she'll come and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm a bit late. And I always say, don't worry, it's fine. Just pop up to the shop and go and do your thing. And but now that you're actually saying that, I do think you are right in the sense that they are actually signing up to volunteer and they must commit. So basically, they're committing to volunteer and they need to commit fully.
Absolutely.
No,
absolutely. I have a friend who is a volunteer at a sort of community theatre. You know, so it's not like a great big artscape or something. And she's nothing to do with acting or anything, but she volunteers to do the box office. You can literally walk in and buy tickets 1 day a week. And that box office opens at a certain time. And she's the sole person there. I mean, she's put a little side up if she runs the toilet, but that's about it. And if she's not there sitting in this glass window thing, then people start queuing up to buy tickets. I know it's insane because you'd think everybody these days buys online, but no. It's just one of the standard things in this community is you go there to buy your tickets, and they like people to do that because they've got a little coffee shop that they make some money from and stuff. And I held it up as a model of that's how you do it properly. Box office opens at 9, she's there at 9. You know, so yeah, punctuality is absolute. So thanks. I'm glad if you share the message that volunteers need to know that they they have a commitment too, you know. Any last comments from anyone else?
Yeah, thank you, Jill, and to the partners in this network space for all the insights. Really appreciate, and volunteerism is a very important aspect of the work that we do, and needs to be handled professionally. When you spoke about policies, I remembered that we have policies, and when we sort of orientate, we have orientation actually, and we talk about those policies. But as I was talking, and when you were also and partners here talking, I realized that sometimes there is written policy and there's practice policy, and they can be very different. And what this has highlighted is the significance of not having things on paper and not practice them, because it gives a bad image actually when things go wrong, like the punctuality issue. If things have to be done in particular ways, otherwise it shortchanges the ethos and even the culture of the organization. When there are people who can have it their own way somehow, and others having to do things the right way. So because volunteerism is something that comes from heart, one wishes that it's really done professionally, really, to respect everybody, even the people that the services are for, and the organization and themselves. So I think it's helpful for everybody to uphold a very high work ethic in that space. So the issue of a practice policy and the written policy, those two must be in sync is one of the lessons I'm taking away from this. Thank you.
I love it. Thank you, Gracia. Absolutely. Anyone else?
Nothing to add, just to say thank you to everyone.
Well, strength to you and all, bless you all on Mandela Day, and thanks for participating. This will be on online, and I know that a lot of people were keen to see this recording. So thanks for your input, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.